assuming this would be better here. Okay. So yes, we are on part 6, assuming that we did go over part 5 yesterday. I honestly was thinking it might have been part 4, but I think we covered part 5, which leads us to part 6. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to start out with another quote by Saint Matthew, and we are not to confuse Saint Matthew with any other individual, but the one who wrote the book of Matthew in the Bible. I realize that because I have Saint Mark after here, Saint Luke, and Saint John. So those are the authors of the 4 Gospels, right? Assuming that they have been canonized in the Catholic tradition, which makes sense, right? There's really, I guess, no other way to go about categorizing these authors of some great text. So yes, we can assume they have been canonized in the Catholic tradition. Probably something I knew at one point, but had since forgotten. Let's go ahead and get into a longer quote, actually. And this is from Matthew chapter 13, verse 3. It says, "Behold, a sower went forth to sow. And when he sowed, some seeds fell by the wayside, and the fowls came and devoured them up. Some fell upon stony places where they had not much earth, and forthwith they sprung up because they had no deepness of earth. And when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no roof, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprung up and choked them. But other fell into good ground and brought forth fruit. So some 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold." Okay, so we remember this parable. This was spoken by Jesus, like a lot of what is in the Gospels, right? Anything notable, we can assume that this was Jesus' words here. So we have some seeds, not necessarily that they were bad seeds, it's where they were spread upon the earth. They got the poor luck, right? They fell into some places that did not produce good growth, therefore not producing good fruit. So again, just kind of a result of their environment, a result of the world, that these seeds did not grow up to what they should have been. But then it's saying here we had some other seeds that fell on good ground, right? And they produced a fruit, some 100-fold, some 60-fold, and some 30-fold. So to go ahead and tie this into what we're discussing, we are continuing the narrative of Saul and his kingship and his leadership. And much like Saul and the other judges, he is guiding the Israelites by way of war. And we do know that, like a lot of the other judges, they ruled for some good amount of time, right? So it's not all, a loss. It's not all a poor life to go ahead and be a leader, be a ruler, be a king, because it does produce some good fruit. And we will discover this as we go into maybe some other rulers or leaders of Israel later on. Again, I honestly cannot recall what's coming later in 1 Samuel and even 2 Samuel, but we will learn, if it was fruitful, if it was not fruitful, at least for this first kingship. We'll take a look at the second kingship, and then of course the third. But we do know that Samuel was warning against the kingship, saying that it was a disgrace to the Lord, and the Lord was also siding on that of Samuel, and probably feeding him lots of those ideas that, the Lord should be the one reflected as king and not anybody else. But we'll see how the fruit holds up from this king, the king after, and then the third king as well. But we do know the outcome from a lot of the stories in Judges and how those leaders went. We had Samson, right? We had Samson. That's really the only one that's coming to mind. But yes. Not necessarily bad seeds, but just the timing and environment at which they grow doesn't produce much fruit, or any at all. But we do have some success here. So let's go into starting also in chapter 13 in Samuel. It says, Saul was 30 years old when he became king, and he reigned over Israel 42 years. So this is also significant because we had a lot of judges and rulers of past time also reigning for about 40 years. That seemed to be kind of the sweet spot for a lot of these rulers. Then it says the Philistines assembled to fight Israel with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as sand on the seashore. They went up and camped at Mikmash, east of Beth Aven. When the Israelites saw that their situation was critical and that their army was hard-pressed, they hid in the caves and thickets among the rocks, and in pits and cisterns. Some Hebrews even crossed the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. Saul remained at Gilgal, and all troops with him were quaking with fear. So this is kind of the result, right? They have leadership, but it's because of the threatening leadership and also the battle that they won prior to this. They're still lacking confidence, even though the Lord is their guide, right? They're still looking to Saul to go ahead and solve their issues, but they're all, fearful, right? They don't have that strong confidence and faith at this time. But it says here, Saul and his son Jonathan, which was one of his children, clearly as it states, and the men with them were staying in Gibeah in Benjamin, while the Philistines camped at Mikmash. Raiding parties went out from the Philistines' camp in 3 detachments. One turned toward Oprah and the vicinity of Shual, another toward Beth Horon, and the third toward the borderland overlooking the Valley of Zeboyim, facing the wilderness. Jonathan said to his young armor-bearer, "Come, let us go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few." His armor-bearer replies, "Do all that you have in mind. Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul." So this is something that's contrasting the way that Saul and the people following Saul, his soldiers, were thinking. So Saul and his people were in fear, his soldiers were in fear. But Jonathan, his son, had this great inspiration of confidence. He was very confident, and even more so was his younger armor bearer that was with him. He had this great line here, "Go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul." That is a line of confidence. That is a line, I trust you, and I trust what you're saying. Jonathan was like, nothing can hinder the Lord from saving. So they had this faith, right? That faith instilled the confidence that they needed. So it turns out, I didn't put all this in here, but it turns out that they went and they kind of ambushed the Philistines, and they tore down, they basically, just the two of them, tore down a bunch of Philistines, maybe 20 or so, I think it said, in the camp. So it says here, Saul's lookouts at Gibeah in Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, "Muster the forces and see who has left us." When they did, it was Jonathan and his armor-bearer who were not there. So they see the Philistines in array, right? Spread out, going crazy. And then they realize, where's Jonathan? So they put 2 and 2 together and discovered that it was Jonathan and the armor-bearer that were not with them. Therefore, they must be causing this defeat against the Philistines, just them two. It says here, then Saul and all his men assembled and went into battle. They found the Philistines in total confusion, striking each other with their swords. So on that day the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved beyond Beth Aven. Alright, so I'm going to wrap this up quickly because I'm receiving a call, but confidence, right? First faith, then comes confidence. And really it just took two individuals, really one and two individuals, to go ahead and change the direction of an entire army, an entire fleet, two entire armies. One was being destroyed, and then the other also regained their confidence from lacking it completely. So just takes, a little bit. We talked about, seeds not working out, and then we had, one produce some good fruit that day. So two, I should say. But yes, let me go ahead and end this now. I will talk to you guys later. I'm going to do a little bit of writing. We'll see what is in store for us as we wrap up 1 Samuel. I appreciate you listening. Have a great Wednesday.